Hey, this is Luke. It's been a minute, but we're back with another episode of building an analytics service from scratch. I moved, and then some stuff happened, and it's been a while, and I don't really remember where we are on this project, but I do want to get it done. So I figured I would just kick off the streams again and wrap up the analytics project. I don't know, certainly not this stream, but we'll see how long it takes. And then we'll decide what to do after that. So let's just jump right back in here, see if we can figure out what's going on. I do have my notes here, so hopefully this is a little bit helpful. Geolocation, multiple tabs, cores headers. I'm looking at these and not finding them too helpful. Let's just start up the app and remember where we're at that way, hopefully. So let's do this. I wonder if I can do this weave thing. Does this work? Does work. Okay, so we've started our app here, listening on port 3000, right? Yeah. Dashboard listening on port 3001. So let's open that up and take a look at what's going on here. I think it's got to take a minute because it builds it the first time it loads. Yeah, here we go. So this is our dashboard. We've got the overall visits here. We've got page, refer, hostname, device type. It's kind of breaking it down into these different subgroups. And then we've got our visitors versus visits aggregation type, I think is what I called that. We also have a look back window here. In theory, if I set this to 365, yeah, there should be some old data from when we tested last. Wow, August 20th. It's a while ago. Okay, so, I mean, at the face of it, this is looking fairly good. We go to visitor, visits. So we've got our site here. We can kind of manage and create new sites over here. Kind of the idea with this was for this analytics service, I want to be able to deploy it once and then reuse that same deployment across multiple different domains. I don't want to have to deploy a separate instance for each domain. So we have that configured or configurable. That's looking good. So I think we added all these tables, right? We've got hostname, refer, page, device type, browser, OS. Hostname, refer, browser, device type, OS, and page. We don't have countries, so that's maybe something that we still want to add. There's a bit of a problem with adding countries though, which is that you sort of need to use a third-party API to geolocate your IP addresses of the people who are visiting your site. And that's kind of a pain. I kind of want to avoid dependency on third-party APIs, and also for the sake of users' privacy, just minimize the amount of information that we're leaking to third-party services. So I'll have to think a little bit about whether we actually want to do that or not. Let's just put a empty box here though. Visitors, page views, and bounce rate. What was I thinking of with this? I don't know. I remember back in the day, somebody sent me a screenshot of the Versal Analytics dashboard, and I was using that as kind of a basis. We do also have a mockup, I believe. Do we not? Yeah. Mockup.excalidraw. So here we can kind of see the intent. page, refer, hostname, device type, browser, OS. And I mean, we're pretty much have got that. I feel like, pardon me, there's going to be some issues with these charts, though. They weren't super polished. I bet as we get more varied data in here, it's going to look a little weird. So that's something we can do, is create some testing data. The other thing is probably just addressing some of these tasks. So in order to actually test this out and get some new data in here, which is probably a good start, we want to open our demo app. So I have the demo app, looks like on port 8000 here. Let's open that in a new tab. And this has nothing, oh, interesting. This has nothing special. But as soon as I visited that, it should have, yeah, generated a new data point here. And if we adjust this look back to just 7 days, we can see that data point. And then if I were to, let's click on the referrer test. What does that do? So that creates a referrer here. And in this case, the referrer is like the site that linked to your site, which you can see through a header in the browser, unless the link has the no referrer attribute on it, which is sometimes done for privacy reasons. So the referrer won't always be present, even if they were linked from somewhere. But when it is present, we want to see what it is. And in this case, because we clicked on the link from the homepage of the demo app, that becomes the referrer. And we can see now that there's 2 pages here. So one thing I want to see is how long the user spent on each of these pages. Currently, we just have like a number, a count. If I close this now, switch to visitors. So, something I'm seeing that's a little confusing to me is for visitors here, this page total is 2. Now, that really should be 1, right? We only have 1 visitor, which was me. Visitor is deduplicated by IP address. We're not doing any kind of special tracking here. So like with a cookie or anything like that, deliberately not using any cookies, purely tracking based on just the information that the browser already has or already sends to the server without adding anything new. You know, I kind of want it to be as privacy respecting as possible while also actually providing some useful information. Anyway, this feels like this aggregation isn't quite right. So that's an interesting question. Maybe I just forget how that's supposed to work, but I feel like no. Let's see. So visitor level aggregation returns 2 for pages, even when there was only 1 visitor. That's not good. I can kind of guess what's happening there. Let's actually take a look. So where is this code? Going to be a little bit of looking around here. I think I have a hook for doing the aggregation. Yes, use aggregated events. I do also have this to do here, which is, let's move that into this, because I think the view time is something that I really would like to be able to see as well. And by view time, I basically mean how long did the user spend on the page. If we actually look at our tracking script here, very simple tracking script at the moment. If you look at the tracking scripts for some actual analytics services out there, they've got a lot of complexity to them, which is mostly to maximize their support for every type of browser, old browsers, new browsers, mobile browsers, desktop browsers. In our case, we're basically doing something much simpler, but providing a best effort approach at handling most browsers. And that's, using this navigator.send beacon API, as well as this visibility change event listener. So the visibility change event listener is used to detect when the user stops looking at the page. Either they just stop looking at it or they switch to a new tab or something like that. I think triggers this as well. Even if they leave the page open, because if you're like me, you probably have a shitload of tabs that you just leave open all the time. It doesn't mean that you're still reading the article for 350 days or however long that tab is out there. So we want to tell how long the user is actually looking at it, which is what this visibility change event listener is for. And this sends this finish, thing, which then lets us know, hey, the user started looking at it at this time, and then they're finished looking at it at this time. The send beacon thing is interesting because that sends an asynchronous request, which means that it can continue running even if the user has closed the tab or something, I think. But it's just sending it off into the ether. You don't really get a response. And it's intended specifically for analytics, basically. Okay, so having said all that, the other thing, this base URL here is not really right. I should add a note about that. That's obviously just a testing deal. Fix base URL in tracker script. Okay, cool. We're getting some stuff to do here. So let's try and fix this aggregation issue. My guess is that we're aggregating it at the level of the individual page and then just naively adding those together. When you can't really do that because it needs to be aggregated by visitor at the total level as well. But that's just a guess. Let's actually see what's going on here. This is some of the more interesting code in this project. Got all these things. I think it's in this use aggregated events. So the aggregation type is going to be either visits or visitors. And it's if it's visits, it's very simple aggregation here. If it's visitors, it gets a little more complicated. And then this inc function is just an increment. Increments a key of an object and also initializes it to 0 if it is not already present. Basically replicating the inc function from Clojure or something like that. One thing I'll just note quickly too while I remember about AI. I have been using AI increasingly for my own development as well as at work even since my last stream, which was a long time ago. And, AI is becoming better and better, more and more useful. I'm going to continue to avoid using it for this stream though. I might use it just to ask some questions or something like that to save time instead of having to watch me dig through docs. But we'll have to see about that. I'm not even sure if it's actually installed on my computer because normally I use it in a VM and I don't have a VM set up for this project. But even if we do that, we're definitely not going to be using it to write any code because I think that's not a good streaming experience. And, it's also not good practice for me. And part of the point of this is for me to practice thinking with my own brain. So let's not use AI. I mentioned that I was just kind of thinking that this would be a task that the AI would be pretty good at. assessing this function where I forgot how it worked and then fixing it, but we're going to do it ourselves. So this is aggregating events, iterating through each event, and then for each aggregation key in the event, which basically is like each of these different things like device type, browser, operating system, these are all aggregation keys. There should be a page URL, so that's also an aggregation key. Which is the one we're concerned with here. So it's going to get the value, which is going to be slash for the root page or slash foobar. If we look back at our thing here, slash foobar and slash, those are going to be our two values for this particular aggregation key that we're incrementing. And so if set.has user ID, then we're incrementing it here. Otherwise, we're adding it. So this logic is correct, I believe, but this isn't what's actually accumulating the total. So it's whatever's accumulating this total that we need to fix. Maybe that's in this use chart data function. No, it's not. So where is this use aggregated events being called from? Let's do find all references. It's called from a bunch of places. They're probably all going to follow a similar pattern, but it's one for each of these different tables. So here we have use aggregated events. That's passed directly into use chart data with specifically the URL aggregation key here. One of the cool things, just to note, this hook is using use memo here. So no matter how many times this use aggregated events hook is called, it's not going to recompute the aggregated events unless either the aggregation type or the events change. So this same hook can be called multiple times in whatever React components to get access to this data without actually incurring a performance cost, which is why we can do something like this in each of these different pages without incurring any performance cost. Anyway, so if we look at the use chart data again, I mean, we were just there, but is this aggregating the total? So first of all, it's taking the data, the aggregated data, which, is aggregated by like user ID and then number or something like that, I think. We're mapping that. Sorry, just wanted to check, make sure that my bitrate isn't going crazy here. I do have a new monitor as well, so a few things have changed. The resolution is different, things like that, but hopefully it's still all right. Okay, so we're aggregating the data, we're sorting. So this is kind of just changing the structure of the way the data is represented. And then this is where the total data is calculated. Okay, I see. So this shouldn't be happening here, I believe, is the problem of what we're seeing here. It needs to be happening over here. So let's do that. It might be a little tricky to figure out how to represent this, though. Let's see what I'm talking about here. So we've got our set, and then we're adding the value to this aggregated events object. So the thing is, we also need to we need to increment, rather than value, some sentinel value. Like, let's just call it total for now, underscore total. And that will get incremented by 1. And we only want to do this when we're adding the user ID to the set. Does that make sense? So what is this conditional here about? So if set, if not set, let's start here. So if there is no set yet in sets, which sets is what's kind of used here to keep track of the unique users. So if it's not in a set, then we're going to, I think we need to put this down here as well, is kind of what I'm thinking. Because this is a case where there's a new user and there's not a set, so we're adding it to it and creating a new set at the same time. Up here as well, there's a new user because we have the not set.has. And so, there's kind of an implied else here where it's like, if there is a set.has, this user ID, then you don't do anything. So this makes sense to me. So then down here, for example, this total data, we could actually just comment that out for a moment. And then refresh this. And now we have this underscore total here, but it's not sorted the way that it should be at the top because we're kind of changing how this logic is working and where that's being rendered. The other problem is what happens if the user, like say, visits a page called underscore total? Is that possible? Maybe possible. Let's just assume that it is, and so this sentinel value here is not really a very safe one. We could do something kind of annoying and tricky, like trying to set it to null, for example, and use null as a sentinel value. I don't know if that will work, though. But let's try it. There are other approaches we could take as well, and I think I'm going to end up with something else, but I kind of want to just see what this ends up doing. So let's go down here and actually log this. And look at what we've got. Ag. Yeah, so you see the null is not even present in here. And this ag, let's just check here. So this aggregated events is just an object of objects. We're not using sets or anything like that. So, I mean, theoretically, this could be set to something else strange. I was kind of thinking it might be sort of cool to try using a symbol here. Another option is you could do something like URL total, like that, and not even have it in the URL object at all. And that might be a way to represent the information in the data model. And that does work and would be fine, but I kind of want to try using the symbol approach because I've never done this before, but I always thought it sounded cool. So if we do like export const total equals symbol. Is that how you do it? And then this becomes like its own unique thing. And then down here, this would be actually total. And it's going to error because it's not assignable to parameter of type string. If I go in here, this would be like string or total. Type of. Yeah. Let's just try this. And then these would be like, same thing. Okay. We still are red somewhere. Oh, so now what are these complaining about? Right. So now it's complaining about the fact that with record, it's kind of like, oh, that has to be in the record. But really, it doesn't have to be in the record, although it will be. So we could just do it like this. Total 0. Let's just do that, actually, for all of these. And again, I don't know if this is necessarily the perfect way to do this, but it's probably a little bit clever if I was doing this in a project where I was collaborating with other people. Never in my life have I seen somebody use a sentinel value symbol in real TypeScript code. But you can, and you know, some people do, just nobody that I've ever met. So let's see, what are we complaining of now? The inc function is unhappy. We don't even need the inc function for this actually, because we've already assigned total in there. It's going to be in there no matter what. We can just plus equals 1 on here like that. And what are you complaining about? Possibly undefined, but it's not. I know it's not. So I will tell TypeScript it's not by using an exclamation point. Okay. So now with that, I'm kind of curious to see what this chart data is going to print out. It's going to be something weird. Oh, it just skipped it altogether. If I look in the ag here, like for URL, so we get this symbol line. Also, that's 2. I wonder, one of those might be visitors and one of them visits. Not sure. Let's see, we might have to adjust our logic. But anyway, first of all, we need to fix this. So this, let's just add a dot filter here. I'm sure there's better, more efficient ways to do this because at this point we're creating multiple intermediate arrays. Normally you don't really want to do that. Like we're taking this data object.entries is returning an array over that. Technically, I think this returns an iterator. I don't know if it's an actual array. And then filter returns an array. And then map takes that array, returns another array. And then toSorted is going to take that mapped array and return another array. So we're creating a bunch of these arrays where in theory, you know, if you did use more of like an iterator pattern, it would be more efficient memory-wise or something like that, but we're not going to worry about that. Just wanted to call out that if you are worried about it, it's something to keep in mind. There are, you know, libraries out there that make it easier to do efficient array operations and things like that in JavaScript. But we're not going to do that. You could also do like a clever for loop and just write it by hand, but that makes it a little less readable, so we're going to avoid that as well. Okay, so here we're going to say key not equal total. Oh, so this is interesting. So it thinks key is always going to be a string. Does object.entries not return symbol keys? If so, that's actually helpful because then we don't even need this filter. Let's just try it up here. See? Refresh again. So let's look, for example, URL. We can see it's got / foobar and symbol. And then here it's got URL 1. Well, I guess this object's not even being... It should be ag.url. Right. To replicate the behavior of use chart, whatever. So now, yeah, it doesn't even include the symbol. So that's actually convenient for us. So we can get rid of this filter. And then we can say our total data is already calculated for us. So this is actually just going to be count is chart data total. And element implicitly has any type because index expression is not of type number. Oh, this would be data total. And then data needs or type of total. See, we're kind of getting some sprawl here because of this unique sentinel value. But like type sprawl, I mean. Really, we should probably define, you could define a reusable type for this. But I think we're fine for now. So let's see how this works now. Yeah, okay. So now we've got our total. We've got our total for visitors, but not visits, right? So first of all, let's update that. So up here, we need to also increment the total whenever we increment a key as well, because this function is handling 2 separate aggregation types and 2 separate conditionals. And we need to increment this total value for both. So now that's working as intended. So why is the page still 2 though, is the question. You'll notice that like with referrer, total of 2, which is correct for visits. Is it correct? Why is this 2 actually for visits now? Because, I mean, I guess that's kind of right. We're just missing sort of like a null referrer value in here. It's sort of questionable whether or not that's what the user expects to see, but it's not exactly wrong either. There's 2 visits total, and this is the referrer for one of them. And then there's kind of should be like a none in here as well, which maybe that's something we could add as well, now that I'm thinking about it. And, if we were to do that, we would almost have another symbol for that, for none. Does that make sense? I don't know, but let's do it. None. And then I am going to make a type for this then. So we're going to call this type aggregation key value. It's the value for a given aggregation key. T equals T or type of total or type of none. And then this would be aggregation key value string. And you can kind of, will be able to see why we're making this a generic type when we get down here, because here, instead of being string, it's going to be device type. And down here, it's going to be operating system, which these device type and operating system are basically more constrained enum string types that we're using. Browser type, just to give us the best type safety we can get. Okay, so that's the thing that feels good and right and just. Maybe not holy, but close. Now down here for ink, we would maybe, I guess, actually not worry about that. So how are we going to set this none one though? Actually, that might be a bit of a challenge, but we'll figure it out. Okay. And we also need to figure out why the total was being set to 2 for the pages. Which I think, okay, I see why. So we've got these two sets here. Or we've got this set here, and it's parameterized on the value. We kind of need another thing that's like total set. And that would be parameterized on just key, like that. Except then we would do like total. Why not? And this would be aggregation key value string. And then we're going to need to do this thing here again. And these are going to just be new sets. Boop, 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 right? Let's actually just kind of copy paste these in. So before I do that, before we just copy paste a bunch, these should be new set instead of 0. And then this can be copy pasted into each of these other lines. Okay, so now we've constructed our sets properly here. And our total set is this. And, you know, will we also need a none set? I don't know, but let's just assume that we do and put it in here, none. And we'll see if we need that variable. Okay, so down here, this ag thing is going to be not in this check, nor is it going to be in that check. It's going to be down below this. We can do if total set, oops, forgot my parentheses, total set dot has user event dot user ID. I guess put a not in front of that. Then here we're going to do this, and we're going to do total set dot add event dot user ID. Okay, so does that make sense? So we have this separate set because up here we were checking if the set has the user ID, but that's the set for this particular value, like slash or slash foobar. So it's actually different sets that we were checking for each value. And now we're checking the same set for both, and we should only increment this total once, if I'm thinking about this correctly. Which is always a caveat you want to add, because otherwise you look stupid if it turns out that you were completely wrong. But in this case, it worked. So now the total is 1, which is what we would expect to see. Excellent. So now let's figure out this none business. Okay, so when would we ever increment the none set? The none value up here. We would increment it when in this if not value case. So we actually have this case sitting here. And, you know, it's interesting because we're also not actually incrementing the total set in that case either, which we probably want to do. Right? I don't know. It's kind of a question how we want to handle this. Let's just give it a shot and see how it feels. Ultimately, I don't know if there's some kind of like statistical, set theoretical, like technically correct way to do this or not. I feel like it's kind of just going to come down to what makes the most intuitive sense as a user. So we're going to do this for now. If there is a value, then do this business. If there's not a value, then we're going to do the none business. And this set, that goes there. Yeah. Okay. Else, and you know, we don't even really need that none set up there. So yeah, and then it's going to be something like this. Boop, boop, boop. If not none set, then none set dot add and none plus equals 1. Okay. So we've got a special case here for incrementing the none set, and it only happens when the value is falsy. Think that makes sense? Okay. So let's just see what's going on over here. So here, you know, visitors 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1. Okay. Let's add the none to the chart so we can also kind of see that better. And that for now we'll just put at the bottom. Again, I don't know if that's going to look good or bad or what, but we're going to put it at the bottom. And we're going to update this actually to be aggregation key value string. Excellent. And now what do we see? So none total localhost 8000. Interestingly, oh, I forgot this should be shift, not unshift really, right? Or push, right? It's not called shift. That would make too much sense. Alrighty. We've got our total, we've got our none. So now if we look over here, the problem with this is, you know, again, we have to update the top conditional of our aggregation logic here as well. So what does that look like? If value so it's going to be like this. If event key, increment that, else we're going to do the none thing. None. Right? Yeah. Okay. So now this looks right. You know, the math looks right. We've got total, blah, 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 none. The other problem though is we've got these empty nones, which I don't know, it sounded kind of weird to me when I said that, but we don't need those. And it's making me think that initializing these nuns to 0 maybe doesn't make sense. The total makes sense as 0 because you kind of always want a total. The nuns, I mean, we might as well put them to 0, I guess. Let's just get rid of this console log while I'm thinking of it. And down here we could just say, you know, if this is a thing, then add it, otherwise don't. Maybe that would be useful in other contexts. We just don't want to render it in the chart. Excellent. Simple as that. Clear as mud. Yes, so let's just take a look at what we've done and then commit it. First of all, we've done some weird prettifying things here. Well, whatever. I feel like I have a bit of an issue with VS Code where it's like, I have it set to use prettier format on save, but then sometimes, I don't know if prettier changed its default settings or if I changed something or what. But it's like it is re-prettifying it and it using different rules. In any case, let's get rid of that. So and let's put a enter there, just, you know, give it a bit more space here. Okay. We're going to call this commit improve aggregation logic. Fix incorrect aggregation for total values and add none values for cases where the aggregation key is missing, is falsy. Let's just say be as correct as possible here. Okay. That's a thing. Feels like a good improvement. Let's commit that. All right. And then if we go to our notes here, we can check this one off. Okay. Calculating the view time is another thing that we're going to want to do. But I kind of want to maybe fix this base URL and tracker script thing as well. Let's do the view time though, because you know, I feel like we're already deep in this aggregation logic. We might as well just like continue to bang our heads against that wall. So what is that even, what is it going to look like though? I feel like within each of these, so I'm trying to remember what I was planning with this. I think it's like within each of the little lines here, and I don't have this in my mockup, but we would have something here maybe, for example, where it was like the average seconds, like in there. Does that make sense? I feel like that makes sense. And then we would have, let's make this small and do the same thing like in each of these others. And then if the thing's too small, then I don't know. Maybe it should just go into the tooltip. For now, let's just put it in the tooltip, I guess. So like each of these things has this tooltip here. I wonder if I could just put it in there. How does that tooltip even work? Let's see. So let's go back to our hooks. to our chart data. So this is just returning key and count. If we just, what if we just try returning something else, for example, like average view time, 1, 2, 3. And then this also needs that. And let's just see if that's all it takes to get it to show up, or if there's other things we're going to need to do. Got to refresh the page again, I guess. Not sure why. I feel like it's supposed to hot reload, but it doesn't seem to be hot reloading. I don't know if that's if I'm just forgetting how that works, maybe. Okay, we've got our average view time in here. Let's go back to where one of the places this is called. This thing looks like two boxes with one pointing at the other box. So here, the horizontal bar chart is getting this chart data, right? And then this is going to need to do a thing. Where is the tooltip defined? Config? No, not config. Chart tooltip, here it is. Okay, so chart tooltip, and then there's content indicator line. What does that mean? Indicator line. Line dot dashed. Is that like the thing on the side? What if I change that to dashed? Yeah, so it's that just that line there. So how do I like change what's actually in it though? Or rather, why isn't it automatically picking up the new piece of data? Type category, y-axis key, x-axis key, label key. Do I need to do key, content? What is label key going to do here? I don't think that's going to be what I want. Content. Content type, value type, name type. What? Okay, let's just let's look this up online. What are we even using here? Is this what charting library even is this? Boo. Recharts, right? It's the thing. It's used by ShadCN charts. Recharts. What the heck? That was a weird one. I think it had my IP address in there too. Oh well. Okay. Tooltip, right? Is that where we're at here? Tooltip? I feel like that's not right, though. Okay, so chart tooltip, and then chart tooltip content. Okay, so there's content. If not set, the default tooltip content is used. I wonder if I just don't set that, is it going to then work? No. I mean, it looks fine though. I don't know why I have this being set, but whatever. Okay. So just to be extra sure here, I'm actually going to log the data. Let's do data, just to make sure that we're not just failing to pass the key in. Because I don't want to spend ages trying to figure out this tooltip thing just to find out that it's a problem with the data I'm passing in. Okay, so we've got count and key and average view time. So there is average view time in these data objects. It's just not in here. Okay, so then we need to look back at this again. And what type of chart is this? Bar chart? I don't know why there's no example of bar chart. Seems like the most common chart. I guess this one is. Tooltip content, custom tooltip. Gosh, okay. Let's just do this. And tooltip content props. You know, is this the right version of recharts that I'm looking at here? Because I feel like it's not quite matching up. So this is recharts 2.15.4. Latest version is 3.8.1. Gosh. And this API here is probably version 3. Is it possible to find, whoa, look at that. Needlessly fancy, but cool. Is it possible to find the earlier version of the docs somehow? Oh God, not like that. Blinding. There probably is, but I don't know what it is. But that's okay. I think that this might actually be not that wrong, though. Let's just put it in here. Content equals, put it as an inline thingy. Get rid of that. And then what are you complaining about now? Let's save this so it formats. Content, it's returning an element. Props, tooltip props, value type, name type, return React node, or a string. Huh? I don't really get what that's trying to say to me right now. So this function returning element is not assignable to this type returning React node or string. But of course it's not assignable to string. But it should be assignable to the other one, right? The other one is a function, accepts props, returns. I mean, does it have to be, what if I do that? Is that going to give me a different error? Element, element, element. Let me look at the example again. Custom tooltip. Like, I kind of feel like it might be trying to tell me that it has to be a React component, not an inline function that happens to be, you know, a React component. Let's see, content equals custom tooltip. And then this is complaining now about content type, value type, tooltip props, value type, name type. Tooltip props, value type, name type. And then this needs to be imported. And then, you know, that needs to be like thatted, except that goes there, right? That goes there, right? Goodness. Well, let's just see if we can return something and have it work, and ignore the types for a minute. Test. Okay, it's not doing anything. As any. Let's just get rid of the type error, right? Why is there still a type error in this file? Ugh. Value type does not satisfy the constraint. I mean, I wonder, do I even need that? Do I need that? What's this? Let's just get rid of that. Just trying to get rid of the TypeScript errors here for a minute. And get rid of the is visible. That doesn't make sense either. We're just returning a test. Don't even need the class name. Just get rid of that too. Okay. Refresh. It's not actually showing up, though, is the thing. The thing is, it's not actually showing up. So there's something that's weird. Yeah, I definitely just don't understand how this works, like at all. Why is it so confusing, man? It's like even though I have the content here, so and then it's just like, where's my test string? You know what I mean? Like, where is it? Is this function even being called? Are you being called? No. No, it's not. It's not being called. Okay. So, why not? What other properties does the chart tooltip have? Recharts primitive dot tooltip. Oh, what the heck, man. Okay, so the primitive is called tooltip, and then shadcn charts is like wrapping that with this other thing. So how does this other thing work? It's not, it doesn't use that content thing at all, does it? Let's look for content here. No, it doesn't. So what does it use? How do I tell what goes in it? Tooltip label, get payload config from payload. So what is the payload? I feel like the payload is going to be the data. Oh my goodness, look at that. Okay. It's the data object. It has the average view time in there. And so we have data key is count, name count. So probably that's why it's putting count in there, is because the name or the data key. Label key, okay, key equals label key or item.data key or item.name or value. So this is how it's figuring out how to get the count. But what if I wanted to return more than just the one? Um, do I have to like hack this component here? I mean, let's add a property. Okay, that's the better way to do it. Let's call it extra keys. And this will be extra keys string. So oh my goodness. I don't know if we actually need to do that. Let's just keep reading here. This is complicated. So it's iterating over all of the items in the payload. And for each of those, it's doing a thing. And then it's got a thing down here. Like this. So let me just add a test here and see if I understand where this is going. Right, so that's like that line. So in theory, this chunk represents one full key data row thing, right? If I just add another one of those, then, okay, that's not really what I thought it was going to do. Count foo 1. Okay, so it's this chunk. This represents a key value pair. Right? No? Right? No? Grid gap 1.5. Nest label, tooltip label. Test. Count foo 1. Span label item name. What the heck, man? And what is this item? Item. So the item, that should be one entry from the payload, right? Dunk, dunk. Yeah. Okay. And then the item, so total is the key, payload key. The indicator is that thing on the side, right? So this should be where the total is. Right? No. Let's get rid of that so I don't confuse myself. Oh, okay. So formatter is a way to override the behavior, the default behavior of the thingy. What is formatter? Type formatter. So what is that type? I don't know. So is formatter a property on the tooltip? There's a label formatter. Formatter. If you return an array, let's try this then. This might be a way to do it without like messing with too much stuff. Okay, get rid of the content, and instead we will do formatter, and this will accept value name item index payload, and it will return, for now let's just return an array, foo bar. What's that going to do? Total bar foo. Okay, so it flips them around. That's lovely, but you know, fine. Let's do this. Console.log value name item index payload formatter. What are you complaining about now? Nothing. Okay. Just was read for no reason. Highlight it. So 1 count. So the 1 is value. Name is count. So in theory, it would be like value name is sort of the normal thing, right? Count 1. But we also want to return more things. What if we do more things? Is it going to know how to do that, or is it going to kind of crap out on it? Well, it didn't crap out, but it ignored them, which isn't really what we want either. What if we do a nested array? Is this going to do something interesting? No, something bad. Something bad. So, gosh, this tooltip business, man. You wouldn't think it would be so complicated. I feel like what we're fighting is an assumption. And also, what happened there? Where'd my line go? First, let's get rid of that. We don't need that. Let's just clean up some of these things we don't need. Don't need to log the data anymore. We already confirmed that. This one, that actually, let's bring that back. Because we kind of like it with the line. So here it's using the custom chart tooltip content, which it wasn't using before. Or it was, and then we stopped it from using that, and now it's using it again. And that's this here again. So I think we are going to need to like extend this, which means we're going to need to figure out how it works. So we've got our grid gap 1.5, nest label, tooltip label, span. So I think this is Yeah, that's where we get our label, and that we want to keep. And then down here is where we get our first value label, I should say. What happens if I add another thing here? And we'll just call this average view time. Okay, so that kind of works, but then the problem is down here, we sort of need another, let's try adding another one of these. It's doing some kind of weird grid thing here that's a little bit, kind of feels like spooky action at a distance to me, the way that like this has to line up with that. They're not both nested under the same element, and it doesn't really work. Okay. Fine. 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 Let's start thinking about this from first principles, shall we? So what we have here is a div. Can't get more first principles than that. No. Okay. So up here, there's like a flex element. Fine. And then in here, there's a flex justify between nest label. What does that do? I don't know, but I feel like we don't really need it. Let's actually make, instead of like ruining this chart tooltip content for anybody else who might want to use it. Also, why is this not exported? Chart tooltip content, why are you not exported? Oh, that's done down here, right? Okay. We're gonna do a new one. And the new one is gonna be better than the old one. We're gonna call this extra. Yeah, what else? What else would we possibly call it? Okay. And the old one, we're going to get rid of that extra keys thing because we're not going to have that. So the old one should be unchanged, you know, except for, of course, some random commas that have been added or removed. Lovely, lovely. The new one, we're going to rewrite it. We're going to remake it in our own image. And we're kind of going to work from the bottom up here. So what we want is get rid of the formatter thing. Don't need that. Which means we can also get rid of all of this. And this. And this. Right? Yeah. I don't know what this nest label thing is. Normally that's set to false. Right? Payload.length equals 1 and indicator is not equal dot. Huh. So normally it's true. Okay, so let's get rid of this. We're gonna get rid of this as well. I'm just trying to make this simple as possible so I can think about it here. Nest label and indicator equals dashed. Indicator is not going to equal dashed, but just in case it does, let's just do this. And then again here, nest label is always true. So this is just going to be items end. And we're just going to put it in this thing. And this is just going to be tooltip label. So let's just make sure that this is not doing something crazy. And then we're going to start iterating on it. Over here, obviously, we've got to change this to extra. Okay. Okay, and it's doing the thing. So, also, I need to get rid of these from up here. I thought that didn't have any changes. Chart tooltip content, comma, 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 comma. Okay, so now it doesn't have any changes. Good, good. Okay, so in our extra one here, we've got our tooltip label. So I don't like the way this is done. Maybe I'm too dumb to understand it, but it just seems really confusing and wrong to me. So let's redo it. So first of all, we've got our div flex justify between. I mean, do we need that? What about leading none? Do we need that? What about items end? I don't really want any of those. So normally with flex, the default is to do row, right? Display or column. Let's just make it explicit. Flex call. So this flex is going to be aligning things on the vertical level here, right? And so then down here, we're going to have the tooltip label, and that doesn't need to be under anything else at all. It just sits under the flex thing, and that's fine. And then we're going to have a grid. And this grid is going to be, it's going to have a key, and then it's going to have a value, and then that's going to be repeated over and over again within the grid. So the value, key value, is going to be like this. And this is going to be always present. And this is all going to be within the grid. And this is going to be that. Okay. So and then how do I do the grid thing for grid calls to, right? So we're saying there's two columns here. The label, name, and value are the two columns. Okay. So this is what it needs to look like. We've got the name and the value, and then below that we've got the next name and the next value. This makes sense to me. I don't know why it wasn't this way before. I'm sure they had a good reason for doing it the way they did, but I like this. Now, one thing is for the names, we're going to align these to the right. So text right. And, you know, we're going to do the same thing down here. So now they're aligned next to the values better. Okay, this looks good. Good enough anyway. So the next thing is, you know, obviously these are hard coded here, and we're going to need to make this using that extra keys thing instead. So extra keys dot map key. And this is going to be a, well, let's do it like this. It's going to be one of these pairs of elements. And can I do key on a fragment? Does that even make sense? Do I need to do like fragment? Key equals key. Yeah, let's do that. And this import from React, sure. Okay. So then this is going to be key. And we're going to improve this later. Like it kind of needs a display name as well. And maybe I should actually have it do that. So let's say key this or label. So label extra keys is going to be not this. It's going to be key string label string array. Okay. Let's go back down. And then this is going to be the value, which we're going to need to pull from the payload, right? So we should have item dot payload key, right? So normally this is just going to be blank. And it is a little weird how the count now isn't really where I would want it to be. Maybe that should be aligned to the left. Let's just leave that aligned to the left for now and kind of see how this feels. Okay. And we'll just kind of try and keep the labels short. The shorter the label, the better it'll look probably. So now in our actual horizontal bar chart, let's actually go in here. Let's remove our unused parameters and things because we did get rid of some stuff. Don't need formatter. And maybe that's it. Okay. So in the horizontal bar chart now, we can add extra keys. And there will be a key of average view time and a label of average time. Let's just call it that. Let's do like average time like that. So now we have both of those things. Very nice. I'm also noticing that the spacing is off. Let's fix that too. So if we go back to here, back to where we were. So there's a problem where there's a gap of 1.5 between each of the grid elements, but not between the top label. I'm looking at the wrong one. Okay. I was like, this looks really confusing. I wonder why. Well, it's because it's a confusing version. Okay. Sorry, just having a quick drink here. Got my kefir protein smoothie. So I think if I do gap 1.5 on this bad boy as well, then our gaps are nice and consistent. But what we could do instead is really this, we kind of want it to be more of just a gap X. Can we do that? Gap X 1.5. That way the vertical stuff isn't so needlessly spacious. That's looking good to me. Okay. Looks good. Let's stage this. Just, get it ready to commit. We're not going to commit quite yet, but we're getting pretty close here. Kind of. We still haven't actually calculated the average view time, which is probably going to be the most complicated part, or I was expecting it to be, but this extra keys business was a little complicated too. So this is cool. So this is actually pretty much all we really are going to need to do in here now. One sec. Had a minor sneezing fit there. Okay. Yeah, got our extra keys. Average view time, average time, sure. And that's it, right? And we don't need that anymore. Yeah. Okay, let's stage that too, just so it's staged. And then how are we going to calculate this average view time now? That's the real question. Also, why do I have it in my head somewhere that we calculated this already? Isn't this... Didn't we do something about this like ages ago? Where would it have been? Not here. Maybe we just didn't. Maybe we just didn't. So I feel like this is going to be a big pain. So let's think about what we mean by average view time, okay? Like, let's take a look at this, for example. Page/foobar. The average view time here is going to be the average view time of all of the events that were put into this bucket. But it's not events, it's visitors, because we're on the visitor aggregation type that are put into this bucket. So there's one visitor, potentially multiple events. I feel like because of the average is like, what do you call it? Distributive? It's got like the distributive property or something. You can calculate it over users in the bucket, and it's going to give you the same as if you calculate it over the individual visits in the bucket. Like if you calculate the average for 5 users by averaging their averages, you're going to get the same number as if you average all of the events individually. Right? I don't know if that's true. It feels true. Let's think of an example. So say you have one user that's at like average of 1 minute over 5 events, and you have another user that's average of 2 minutes over 5 events. Then what you would get is an overall average of 1.5. But if the user 2 was average over 10 events, then you would actually get a different number if you were to average them all individually versus if you average two users together. Two users together would still be 1.5. If you average the events individually, you would get less, right? You would get like 1.25 or something, 1.3. So, what does it mean? What does the average view time mean? So I feel like for users, we kind of need to calculate the average view time. I don't know. Let's start with visitors or visits. It'll be simpler. Maybe it'll give us some insight. So for visits, it's relatively simple. The average view time is the sum of the view times for all of the events that fit into the bucket divided by the number of events in the bucket, right? That's relatively simple. Famous last words. Okay. So, and how are we going to aggregate this is the other question. So presumably we want it in here. The problem is that this is just aggregating numbers. It's not, there's no space for average view time. If we wanted to fix that, it's kind of a big pain, actually. Because really the way you would fix it is by doing something like this. Count 0, average view time, something, right? And it would be like an object of objects of objects of objects, or whatever. But that would kind of require us to rework how this whole function works, which is annoying, but it might be a good thing to do. I mean, the other thing I was thinking is we might actually end up wanting to have our actual events individually recorded in here as well. Because, for example, the user might want to be able to drill down and see, okay, which specific events were there for this particular thing? You know, like if I click on this page total or page slash foobar, click, and it brings up like the events, you know? So I feel like eventually we're going to kind of want to track the events individually in here as well. And if we do that, then the average view time could be calculated more based on those events. So that kind of makes sense. That kind of makes sense, right? We wouldn't even need to really calculate the average view time here at all, because that could be calculated later when it's needed. And we could also calculate other types of statistics based on the events. The problem is this is great for visits, because this is like visits. These are the visit events, right? But what about visitors? Because for visitors, we have now a nested structure here. It's this visitor, and then the events for that visitor. Or we could avoid that, but I don't know if we can avoid that. So it kind of breaks the consistency of our types here. You know what I mean? Like the output type of this function is going to have to be different for visitors versus visits aggregation types. Not sure how I feel about that. Not sure at all. So the other thing is we could maybe have both like that. So say we did that. Then down here, say for visits, we would say if event.key, this would actually be incrementing the count, which in theory, this inc function could actually be updated to, do that. And then we don't really have to change those lines. And this would be like equals count 0. Just start there. Maybe let's start with that. Yeah, okay. So we'll start by just like turning this into an object with a key of count, because that's kind of going to be a requirement for whatever thing we're doing here. And that way we can then take this step by step and avoid blowing our minds with the complexity of making a change that's too complicated at once. And so this number we're going to make a new type here, type aggregation data. Sure. And that'll be an interface, I guess. Interface count number. And we can add more things to this in the future. That's the genius of it. Instead of just having this be a number, it's an object that we can add things to. And then down here, now this is telling me I missed that one because of our types, which is great. I would love to format this better. Like you want it to be like this, right? Where it's all lined up nicely. But if I save, Prettier is going to undo all of that. So we can't do that, but it doesn't really matter. And so now these inc things, inc should actually key string, and this would be aggregation value or aggregation data or undefined. Yes, like that. Okay, so now the inc thing works. This needs to be none.count. And yeah, don't make it optional. Oh, do it like that. Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. Feeling good about this so far. These weird sets. The sets might actually become part of this aggregated events. Now that I think about it, we'll have to think about that. And then, this is actually going to be .count, right? And this would be aggregation data. Kind of need another type for this, don't I? But whatever, that's fine. And this would be, what are you complaining about? What are you complaining about? Oh, I know what it's complaining about. This needs to be, this actually, we could just do it like this. Something a little fancy. Okay. So that should work, right? Let's go back over here. Yeah, we've got our counts. The counts are still shown. They're still correct. If we switch to visitors, still shown, still correct. You got our ones. Excellent. So now we can start adding. And kind of what I'm thinking is we kind of need this ag thing. So let's look at this if. What's after this if? Nothing, just return ag. I think we're going to maybe need this to actually be well, let's just calculate the average view time actually. Let's not worry about storing the events individually. We can do that later if we actually need it. First, let's do this. Average view time number. And this will just be 0, I guess. That's like the default state for an average, right? File that under things I should probably know, but don't. Okay. Oh, and hey, now it's actually a lot easier to read. Great. So that's cool. So now down here, this actually needs the average view time. Yep, like that. And really, this is also going to need to let's do, it's kind of weird name here, but that's fine. Key of aggregation data, right? So now that's going to be either, oh, not a comma, or yeah, like that. Right. Right. Okay. A little bit confusing here, but that's fine. So then this needs to have count. And we're going to need to separately increment the average. But for now, we're just incrementing the count. Okay, so that should still be working. And then down here, this average view time is going to be data total dot average view time. And the same thing down here, but with none. Great. Okay. Then up here as well, this is going to be average view time. Average view time, yes, just like that. So now if we go back to our chart, we should see that just defaulted to 0 for everything. Awesome. And when we actually start incrementing it, we will be able to see that number change. So let's start with visits here. So we're incrementing average view time by, we're going to do average view time. And this is going to be the view time for the event. I might just make a little helper function for this. Function event view time. Event is whatever this type is. I should have a type for this, right? User event, yeah. So this is going to take a user event and it's going to return, let's say, if not event.endTime, return null. Okay, so we're going to need to think about handling this case. Not all events are going to have a view time, either because the user hasn't actually switched off the page yet, or if they're using no script, like if they have JavaScript disabled, we can't actually calculate their end time. We can only tell when they visited the page. We can't tell how long they were on it. So what should we do if there is no end time? Presumably you could treat that as something like 0, but that's kind of going to skew the numbers because it's not accurate to say that it's actually 0. It's unknown. So really we should probably exclude these from the average altogether, right? Is what I'm thinking. So we're going to return null, number or null. And if there is an end time, we're going to return event.endTime minus event.startTime. That's going to be the event view time. Just a little helper function there. You know, I should probably be writing more helper functions as I go through this aggregation logic here, but whatever. We can refactor it later maybe if we feel like it. Okay, so then here we would be like if no, const average view time, or yeah, let's just do const view time equals event view time event. And that actually can go up here. We don't need to recalculate that for each key, just once for the whole event. And then we would say, what is, okay, yeah. If view time, let's say if type of view time equals number. So we could say if view time and do like a truthy falsy check, but in theory this could also be 0. I mean, you'd have to be a really fast user to visit the page and then leave it within the same millisecond. But it's theoretically possible, right? And then it would be 0, but it wouldn't be included in the average. And if we did like if view time like this, because view time of 0 would be evaluated to falsy. So we're going to say if it's a number, then we're going to do a thing. And the thing is, we're going to increment the average view time by view time, but not just view time. We're going to pre-divide it. I feel like this is a thing you can do with averages, right? You can pre-divide them by events.length. I mean, I know it's not going to be undefined because we wouldn't ever get into this for loop if it wasn't defined. Okay, so, that's going to pre-divide that average, and then we're going to add up all of the pre-divided ones, and then we don't need to divide it again at the end. I think that's right? It's like, say you got like two events of like 1 and 3. The average of them is 2 because it's 1 plus 3 divided by 2 is 4 divided by 2, which is 2. If you do it separately, you get 1 divided by 2, which is 1/2, plus 3 divided by 2, which is 1.5. And then you add them together and you get 2. So yeah, I think this works. Okay. Then, we need the same kind of thing in this else. So like this is another example of something where it's like, would be nice to have this as some kind of helper function. The problem is that it requires access to these ag and event things. So you kind of would need to have a bunch of properties for it, a bunch of parameters, and then it's like you're not even really saving yourself anything. It's basically just removing the conditional. You could put that in your helper function, but it doesn't really matter unless you put it here as a closure function defined inside this function, if that makes sense. But anyway, let's not worry about that. Okay. So, and here in event key, we're going to do this ag key, the event key, this is going to be none. And I guess we don't even need to use inc here. Is kind of going to be the thing to do. We're going to do ag key none dot average view time plus equals this value. And maybe we should pre-compute this up here actually. So let's do average view time, event divided by events dot length. I mean, okay, fine. View time const average view time equals view time question mark null, or no, that would be this. Otherwise we sort of carry forward the null. And then these would just be average view time like that. Average view time like that. That way we just avoid recalculating view time. Again, not that it really matters, but we don't need to recalculate that for each key. It's the same for everything within this event, this for loop of events. And then the same thing we would do down here, basically. Boop, boo, da, da, da. Yep, and this would be total. Okay, that's a thing. That actually should work for the visits aggregation type, not the other one though. Let's take a look. First of all, why did these, oh, one sec. Okay, so back to hook, we're already on hooks. If we go down to use chart data, this needs to be like dot count so that we don't get those empty zeros in here. Right. Okay. So here, the average view time, it's actually showing the numbers. And why do they seem wrong? You know, is it just me, or is this one like the sum of these other two? But it shouldn't be the sum of those other two. Should it? No. It should be divided by 2. Oh, okay. So this events.length, that's correct for the total. For the others, it's not. Okay, let's do this differently here. First of all, no, get rid of that. Brain hurting time. So this is view time divided by events.length. Exclamation. Okay. And then these, we don't actually know what it will be until we're done aggregating. So I think we need to wait until we're done aggregating. Because then we have the count. And then we can use that count to do the division. But until we have that count for each of the buckets, we can't do the division. And actually, let's just do this one as like that too. We can be consistent here. And then we can say for const key for const key of object this thing. Let's just do this. I think we're going to go through all of these again, and then we're going to say what? Gosh. I think we need another for loop in here. Let's do like const buckets equals ag key. First of all. So now we've got these buckets, and each of these are going to be an individual bucket of data, bucket of buckets of object.entries buckets. And actually we could do object.values here, I think. And then this is going to have a count and an average view time. And we're just going to say, well, let's do this as a bucket, because we're going to need to assign back into it. And then we say bucket.average view time equals, is there divided equals in JavaScript? Divided equals bucket.count. Never used that operator in my life. Divided equals. Seems like it should work though. Feel like that should work. And then we also need to do the same thing for the total in each bucket and the none, because those aren't going to be hit by object values. Right, buckets, total, dot, average view time divided by equals, buckets, total, dot, count. And we're going to do exclamation points instead of question marks because we know these exist. And that way we don't have red squiggles. And then we're going to do the same thing for none. But for none, we need to make sure that the count isn't 0. If count if buckets none dot count, then we do this. Because if it's 0, obviously you can't divide by 0. I don't know what happens in JavaScript if you try to divide 0 by 0. But let's not find out. Hopefully it wouldn't explode the world, but you can never be completely sure. Just looking at what I wrote, and I'm feeling fear in my soul when I imagine trying to do this for the visitors, bucketing, but that now you see the number actually makes sense here, because for the slash, our average is high. For the foobar, it's lower. And for the total, it's like in between them, which is what you would expect for the average. So this is looking pretty good to me. Obviously, that's a very unscientific way to think about it, but you know, it looks okay, right? Looks okay. Okay, so let's think about how to do it for users now. Gonna hurt my brain a little bit more here. So first of all, we're going to want to calculate the average view time per user or are we going to want to calculate it for the whole thing? No, that doesn't make sense. It would be the average view time on that page for each user that viewed it. And then average those together? Or would it be the average view time of all of the events of all of the views of the users? But then that would be just the same as the number up here. Right? Would that just be the same? I feel like it might just be the same number. Am I crazy? I mean, what else could it be? Like if 2 users viewed it for wildly different times, like say one user viewed it 1,000 times for 1 second each, and one user viewed it 1 time for 1,000 seconds. What would you expect the average view time to be? Would it be like 1.1? Or would it be like 500? Because one of the users viewed it 1 and one of the users viewed it an average of 1,000. And it's like average of those two. I feel like it would be close. It would be like 1.1 or 1.01 or 0.01 or whatever it would be. I think that's right. I think that's right. And if that's what it is, then we kind of can take this bit of logic and actually take it out of the ifs and put it down here. And then we can just kind of do this thing here. But the interesting thing about this is we'll do it outside of the set stuff. So it's before we even check or care about the set stuff, because we're always going to increment that value whether the user is in a bucket with existing users or not. It doesn't matter. Right? So it's like this. And then the view time for the event is like that. And then this inc ag key value, we might as well reuse that value. Average view time. Yeah, something like that. And then that would also be down here. And this would be not using inc, it would be using this ag key none dot average view time plus equals view time. And then we would also need this down here in the total. Well, that wasn't so bad, right? Famous last words, maybe? Maybe not? Certainly is proliferating a heck of a lot of like ifs and conditionals and just weirdness in here. But, you know, I mean, what I will say about that is a lot of times when I make apps, I find that there is usually one or two functions that are like this, where it's just like a bunch of complicated logic, weird number logic array munging, ifs, conditionals, craziness. And it's like where all of that lives. And then like the rest of your app practically is just like views and stuff, you know, it's like rendering it. But there's this like incredibly dense function like right in the center that's like calculating all of the data. It's a pattern that I've seen before for sure. And arguably the advantage of it is, you know, as complicated as that function might be, hopefully you don't have to change it too much. And it encapsulates all that complexity within itself, you know, so the rest of your app can just deal with, in this case, the neatly aggregated data instead of having to, you know, deal with whatever this mess is. But yeah, I feel like this makes sense to me. So let's just see what it looks like here. So visits, total 2, average 5901. Then there's 1 here and 1 here. If we go visitors, so that's not right. That is right. That is right. Oh, so, oh. Oh. So this is not going to work for this because the count in the bucket is not the count of the events that would go in the bucket. I mean, am I crazy to wanna recursively call this function inside itself? Oh my god. I must be crazy to want to do that. But I want to know these counts. I want to calculate these counts down here so that I can do the average. But I'm already calculating these counts up here. Maybe I should make this all into its own function. Maybe this should be its own function. Let's see. So let's think about this. How are we going to do that? Function initial aggregate events. I can spell, right? No, I can't. So we're just going to copy paste. this doesn't take anything. This is an easy function to write. And it's just going to return this. Let's type it as aggregated events. And it's going to return this. Okay. So then this can go here. But we're not actually going to do that. We're going to take this and we're going to put this in another function. Function aggregate events by visit. And this is going to accept an array of events. And the ag here is going to be that. And then we're going to return ag. Okay. So then here, this is going to just return calculate. Don't know what I called it. Oh, aggregate events by visit. Aggregate events by visit, events. And events could be null. So, I mean, fine. Okay. Oh, or undefined. Okay, so that makes sense, right? And then we can actually do the same thing for aggregate events by visitor. Except instead of doing this, it's going to do all of this. Like that. And then there's also this chunk down here, which I forgot about. That needs to go up in here as well. Okay. So this is going to return aggregate events by visitor events. So then in this aggregate events by visitor events, we're going to need to do something like this. But we're going to need to actually calculate ag by visit equals aggregate events by visit events. And, you know, is this weird? It's a bit weird, but hey, what's the problem? I don't know. Maybe there's no problem. And then this will be divided by not bucket.count. This should be object.entries now. Entries. Entries. And this is going to be bucket key, bucket. And then this is going to be ag by visit, key, bucket key, dot count. Object.entries buckets. Why is that not happy with that? I mean, I don't know if it's just TypeScript complaining or if there's an actual problem with what I just typed. So buckets is ag key, ag by visit key, bucket key. No, I think that's right. I think TypeScript just needs to accept that that's right. Okay, it still doesn't even like it with any. So I guess it's because implicit has any type. So really it should be like over here would be as aggregation data. Wait, what? Hmm, that's annoying. There must be a way to fix that, but let's not worry about that for the moment. The problem is it's like somewhere along the way, it's lost that ag and ag by visit have the same structure because we're like key, like bucket key here is a string when really it should be something more complex. You know what I mean? Um, More specific, but whatever. Okay. Okay. Anyway, let's just, let's just do this. It should be like that. How do I get this to not complain? Oops. I don't know. Well, it doesn't need to compile to work, right? So now this should be half of this or in between this and this, which it is. So these numbers are exactly the same here. 5901, 4742, 9060 as over here. 5901, 4724, 9060. I think that's what we want. I think so. Um, okay. Okay, let's not worry about fixing that TypeScript error for now. I'm just going to leave it to complain. And we will commit this rather major update here. And I mean, total, none, like, it all seems to be working still. I don't know, I think it's working still, everything. So I guess the one other thing we should do maybe is these things should be for now, let's just divide it by 1,000. Well, whatever. Divide it by 1,000, and we'll wrap this in a template string. And do it like that. And we'll do the same thing down here. Just make sure to change this to none. And we will do the same thing up here, but it's going to be this. Okay. So that should now render these, yeah. And I guess we could do like this. to fix to precision. Yeah, I think we want this. To fixed 1. Really don't need more than 1 seconds worth of precision, I feel like. Or 1/10 of a second even. Yeah, okay. That's good enough for now. And, you know, obviously if somebody's might want minutes, hours, etc., we can update that formatting to use an actual date, human readable date formatting conversion doodah. Okay, and so we will call this include average view time in bar charts. Very cool. Commit that. Okay. Let's see, what else have we got here? Let's check this off. Maybe we want to put it in other places, want to do other stuff. I don't know. Whatever. We'll do that later. All right, base URL and tracker script. Let's think about this a little bit. So the problem here, and this will be a nice step away from brain bending hook functions, hopefully. The problem here is we've got this base URL, which is obviously just included for testing purposes. What is this even used for? This is the base URL of the server. So like that's like this thing. You know, we've got this port 3000 the server's running on, and then this is like, oops, yeah. This is like calling that. So, and if we go down here, we actually have this tracker script being built separately over here. So if I change this, it'll rebuild this tracker script. And then that gets served separately again by our demo server thing down here. This, if you're wondering, by the way, this like multiple scripts running in the same terminal window thing is it's called Weave, and it's also something that I've coded up myself. This is a little TUI, terminal UI, for running multiple scripts and like viewing their output separately, or you can view it all mixed together or whatever. And you can also restart the processes. Like if I'm over here, I can hit R, it'll restart that process. It does have mouse support even, but not in Windows, which is what I'm using. Okay, so anyway, so the problem is this, and we need this to be, we need to figure out what this is going to be. And in order to do that, we kind of need to understand our deployment model here. So let's look at the demo app. So the demo app is referencing tracker.js directly from localhost. So we're not hosting the tracking script separately from the Nanalytics app. It's being hosted from the Nanalytics app. Let's confirm that's the case. If we go to, I think, server index here, we should see a route that's serving the tracker script here. Yeah. But it's serving it on a different port. I remember now. And the idea was this port would be exposed to the public, and this other port would not be. But Yeah, and so like these routes here are public, like the record route is public, but these other routes that are used for the dashboard are using the dashboard port, which would be behind the fly proxy where you need a fly.io authenticated account to access it. So we can avoid building our own authentication or, whatever other service you're using. You basically wouldn't want to expose this dashboard port to the internet. I remember now. So the question then is with this tracker.js, pardon me, can't we just like get this from our own location? Like, what if I do location dot origin? What is that? Let's see if we can see what we can see here. Let's just do console.log location. And then we would go over here. No, we would go to localhost 8000. We would inspect. And we see our location. And the origin is that. So that is the thing. Now, if I were to do like /ASDF, the origin is still right. So I think that's what we want. And that's actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Very nice. Very nice indeed. Okay. Fixed base URL. Check. Oops. Check. I mean, we did that. I don't know. What's up with that? I don't really want to deal with these other things right now. We'll have to do some probably more complicated, oops, I just punched my mic. Some probably more complicated testing later. Yeah. Let's see then. Is there anything else we want to do today? I'm thinking no. I'm thinking it's about time for me to wrap up for the evening. Let's see, anything else to commit here? Right, that thing we just did. Okay, so this is don't use hard-coded base URL in tracker. Cool. Okay, so let's quit this whole thing. You can quit it with Q and then push our changes. And that's going to be it for me tonight. Thank y'all for watching and have a good one. I'll see you. Well, I don't really have a plan for a fixed schedule. I might be on again next Friday, but we'll see. Who knows? It's going to be a surprise. But I'll see you later. We're going to finish up this app one way or another. Adios.